Is it possible to fit the Honda XR650R countershaft sprocket to the Honda XR650L? In this video, I chat about my experience with the XRR sprocket on the XRL, and the sprocket is from BPR. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Francois from adventurebiketroop.com, where we chat about bike riding, maintenance, travel tips and more. Please subscribe and hit that like button. No, seriously, please subscribe now. Thank you. Now, when I bought this bike, I read up on it and I always try to find out what are the main issues to sort out that will cause issues down the line. And the biggest thing on the Honda XR650L is this countershaft sprocket. It's very thin, it's 8.5 millimeters thin, the contact area of the sprocket on the spline of the countershaft. So on many riders report that it wears the shaft prematurely and quite quickly for some people because it's so thin. Now there are other reasons as well. The bike doesn't have a cush drive, so there's more strain on the drivetrain. A lot of people run the chains too tight. It's quite a long travel suspension, so it's easy to over tighten the chain when the suspension travels. This bike had only 108 links instead of 110 links in the chain, so the guy shortened the chain. The previous owner, it had 2 master links in it, so I was worried that the countershaft already had damage. Now some riders report serious damage on the countershaft splines from as little as 5,000 miles. Now I've got about 8,000 miles on this bike, and there is a little bit of wear which I'll show you in a moment. Now I've heard of one rider that did 74,000 kilometers on the original, not the original single sprocket, but the stock sprocket, so replacing with the stock sprockets. So if you do maintain the drivetrain properly and tension the chain and lubricate it, then it is possible to last the life of the bike, the countershaft. Otherwise Honda would have fixed the problem, but you have to keep your eye on it, and I don't like that. I'd rather upgrade to something that's more reliable and durable in the long run. Now there are a couple of options, aftermarket options. One of the most well known is the Frisco front sprocket. You can get it on eBay. There's a link in the description, and this is a much wider contact area with the splines, the countershaft, and it's aligned properly so that the chain is exactly the same alignment as the stock sprocket. I've ordered one. It's quite a weight here, and it's where we are with shipping and with coronavirus, so there aren't any Frisco sprockets locally available at the moment. The other option is Super Pinion from KK Bike. I've heard only good things about it, but that is again very thick, that contacts the whole spline. But the problem is, again, it's super expensive, and with shipping it'll cost me more than $100 for a sprocket that is a wear item, so I have to replace it anyway. So and if you want 2 different gearings, so I've got a 14 tooth on here now, I had a 15 tooth, that's the original, then it becomes really expensive to have to get the Super Pinions sprocket. So what I ended up doing, just for now until I get my Frisco from the supplier, is I got an XR650R sprocket. So that's the other option, a cheaper option that many riders do, and I was interested to find out how easy it is to fit it onto the XR650L. So when I got the XR650R sprocket, because I'm waiting for the Frisco and this is just a temporary fix for now, I also replaced the chain with the new one with the proper 110 links. But anyways, I went for the 14 tooth just to check what it does to the gearing, because the second gear is quite tall. It's very wide apart from the first gear, and the gearing is awesome now. The amount of torque that it has low down. So this is a 14 tooth. There's also less noise because the 15 tooth results in the chain grinding away at the chain or the sprocket guard here, the sprocket cover. So it's removed now just so you can see there. And I also wanted to see whether the noise is gone. But anyways, the 14 tooth, definitely there's more space here. With the 15, it's actually difficult to get the sprocket cover on because it actually touches, and that's the stock size sprocket. Anyways, I went for the 14 tooth. Awesome difference, but it's so easy to swap out. So when I get the 15 tooth Frisco, I'll just take both with me and swap them as needed. Now I think, and I might be incorrect, so please comment below if you have more accurate information, but I think you can fit the XR600R sprocket straight onto the XR650L. I went for the 650R sprocket. You have to swap it over or turn it around so the flat face faces out from the engine. That's the opposite way from how the 650R runs it. And that misaligns the chain, and at the end I'll show you what the chain looks like from the rear and how out of alignment it is. Anyways, to fit the sprocket, I turned it over and it wouldn't go on the splines, and I think it's because there were some wear on it. I initially thought it's got the wrong tooth pattern on the splines, but I phoned the supplier and he said no, you have to lightly tap it with a hammer, and I've seen that online as well, and I mean, it just sounds wrong to tap on the counter shaft that goes into the gearbox. But anyways, with lots of oil and very light tapping, I managed to get it onto the splines, and it was just from the slight wear pattern from the original sprocket. But eventually, as it started moving, it went on quite easily, but I couldn't get the retaining plate on into the groove. The sprocket is too thick. So I took it to a friend that has a lathe, and he removed about 1 millimeter from the inside. It goes to the crankcase side, and he put the bevel back in, so the slight inward edge thing, I'm sure there's a better name for that bevel cut, but anyways, so he put that, ground that back in, and after that first few taps, the first time, it went on and off quite easily. So I put some grease in there. A lot of people say you need to use moly grease, and I'm not an engineer. I just used copper compound. I hope that's fine. Again, comment if that was the wrong grease to use. So let's have a look after about 100 kilometers with this sprocket, what the wear pattern looks like and whether it actually comes off the splines again. So removed the master link, took out the chain, undid the bolts. I used blue Loctite on it so it came out easily. As I took off the sprocket, it came off very easily because I used grease the previous time. You can see on the inside, the crankcase side, the wear pattern. You can see where the chain started eating away at the sprocket, and on the other side it's completely clean. So there is definitely some misalignment because the sprocket is further out from the crankcase than the stock sprocket. Anyways, it doesn't look too bad. So I put it back in, cleaned everything out, greased it again with the copper compound, some blue Loctite on the bolts, put the chain back on, and if you look at from the rear on the chain, the misalignment, with the naked eye it's almost impossible to see any misalignment. It looks perfectly straight, but from the wear pattern on the sprocket you can see there is some wear, and I'm interested to see what it looks like after 1,000 or 2,000 kilometers, so I'll report back then. If you have any experience with XR650L sprocket and countershaft spline wear, and which aftermarket sprockets you use, there's many available. You could even get some, I think from Amazon, there's a make that sells there. So please let me know. If you want links to the Fritzko or the Super Pinion, you can check in the description, and please subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up, and I'd love to hear from your experience with this issue on the Honda XR650L. Thank you for joining us, and see you next week.